Thanks for staying with us. This is Morning Spring on Western Spring Television, and we are live on StarTimes channel 190. We're also streaming live on YouTube at Western Spring Television NG. Daniel Emeka is my name. This morning, we'll be taking a look at a critical aspect of our lives as a nation. On May 29, 2025, Nigeria celebrated 26 years of unbroken democracy. But here we are, as a nation, we are still struggling with the conduct of free, fair, and credible elections. This morning, we'll be taking a look at the body, the institution saddled with the responsibility of conducting elections in Nigeria, talking about the Independent National Electoral Commission. And as we build up to 2027, are we really prepared? We've been talking about electoral reforms. So far, we have not really made much progress. If you look at the just concluded by-elections in Nigeria, in certain states across the nations, the elections were rife with allegations of vote buying, manipulations, and bribery, thuggery, and so on. So we really need to look at this issue. The Electoral Act 2022 was enacted, to give a legal framework to address cases such as election manipulation, electoral impunity, address weak democratic institutions, and also talk about these inefficiencies, of course, in operational inefficiencies of Inec. However, that law was tested at the 2023 general elections, and several loopholes were exposed after the elections, which led to a plethora of contestations, legal contestations, of course, as a result of those loopholes in the Electoral Act. The Electoral Act contains some ambiguities, some things were not clearly spelled out. I'll be looking at some of them this morning on the program, talking about Nigeria as we move towards 2027. Are we ready for free and fair, credible elections in Nigeria? The opposition has actually accused the ruling party and, of course, Inec of being infiltrated already. So if dissenting voices are coming from the opposition, if they do not trust the umpire to conduct the elections, then we might be having a huge task on our hands as a nation. In other parts of the world, in countries like Kenya, South Africa, and the US, opposition is actually consulted. They are part of the processes, of the electoral processes. But here, the situation is different. We'll be taking a closer look at that on the show this morning. And joining us on this conversation is Mr. Idowu, Mr. Bukola Idowu is Executive Director of Kimpact Development Initiative. Good morning, Mr. Idowu.
Good morning. It's good to be here again.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to have you. Mr. Idowu, this morning we'll be taking a close look at 2027 and Inec. For instance, let's start with the fact that the current Inec chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, he's been there since 2015, was appointed October 21, 2015, and his tenure expires very soon, by October. It should be done, so by November, he should be out of office. Now, Mr. President is shopping for his replacement. You have been involved in elections in Nigeria. You've been an observer. So let's start from there. How do you think INEC officials should be selected if we are to uphold integrity in the process?
So basically, all over the world, there are about 3 ways of choosing management of election management bodies or leadership of election management bodies all over the world. Number one, you can either go into what our own constitution recognizes, which means the set of people must be independent and they should be non-partisan. So which means you get capable and technocrats, experts into INEC leadership. The second means is also to choose from representatives of political party, which means all political party come together and choose who should be the leader of that political party. Now, basically, So what we have in Nigeria is the first one I talked about, which the Constitution says. However, and that talks about the character of the people or the set of people that should lead the election management body. But in terms of the procedure for appointment in Nigeria, currently, the president is the one that appoints. The president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria is the one that appoints. Now send it to the Council of State for probably ratification before sending to the National
Senate.
Assembly.
Yeah.
To the National Assembly, to the Senate, to be precise. And after that, if the Senate now approve or ratify the appointment, then the leadership stage. So, and it starts from two layers. One, the resident electoral commissioner across the 36 states of the country go through that process, and then the national, three layers. One, the REX, which is the resident electoral commissioner, goes through that layer and that process, then the national commissioners too, and then the Inec chairman. So those three layers are appointed through that same process. The rest of the staff, any other staff you see in Inec are just career staff, civil servants. So, but what is the flaw? What has been the issue with this particular process, and which someone like us have been basically advocating for that system should change? For instance, you just in your introductory remark, you mentioned that Professor Mahmoud Yakubu tenor, we had maybe November, of course, by November, the man should be done and should leave anytime from December. Normally, we should have new Inec chairman. But this is what we are trying to say. This is 2025. The tenor is going to end. Now, think about it. If President Tinubu, who is going to appoint the next set of leaders for Inec, is also going to be a contestant in 2027 election, which means the man that is going to be on the ballot is also the man choosing the Inec leadership. That alone looks like a flawed process. Now, which means the man that is going to be a player is the one selecting the referee. So, and people have criticized that particular process. So, which means, and also Justice Uwe's committee also came up with its recommendation, even regarding this. Now, and there are several recommendations. Number one is that, look, there should be a neutral body that should be responsible for this selection. So you take it out of the office of the president, you take it out of the control of the politicians. Number two, another school of thought, which another committee has also recommended, that NJC should be saddled with the responsibility of selecting. Then the third one is that, look, the process of selection should go through the public procurement, which means people interested should apply, and then they should be screened. So when you look at these three processes, of course, all of them still subject to the National Assembly. The only area you now take out is just the power of the president to appoint. So, and I think this if we go through that route in our electoral circle or in our electoral process, that would be better. Whichever one we pick out of the three, that would be better. But as it is today, election all over the world is about perception. No matter how good the election is, if the people, the opposition and the citizen perceive the election management body as biased or likely not to be fair to all, then no matter what you do, that election is as integrity has come to be questioned. So, and that is why we need to look into this. But my challenge is, I'm not really sure if this is going to happen, because it's presently in discussion in the National Assembly, the electoral amendment going on and the constitutional amendment going on. But what it means is that this may not have been signed to law before the appointment is made. So, which means, and that is why everybody is looking for who Mr. President may likely choose, and the National Assembly may likely ratify.
All right, Ms. Idowu. As it stands right now, the Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, SERAP, has already accused Mr. President of appointing at least 3 leaders in INEC who are APC members. How does it look? How would Nigerians perceive this? You have said it, that it might take some time, that you are afraid that any reforms might not be signed into law before 2027. So what should we be doing as a people right now? If you look at a place like, Mr. Idowu, if you look at a country like the US, their Federal Election Commission, where members of opposition, at least 3 members from each party, are represented right there in their election commission. Why can't we do something like that in Nigeria? You know, some political watchers have said, why is it that opposition are not part of that process? Because if we have representatives of opposition parties at every level, then of course, any decision, any results released will be the one agreed to by these parties. Why are we not towing that line?
If you recollect, in my opening response, I said there are about 3 ways, theoretically and all over the world, at which you can choose leadership into election management body. And I talked about political party coming together. So which means each of the political party are represented in equal proportion. So, and decision is made. Now, if this happens, so what it means is that, for instance, now, if we have 19 political parties in Nigeria as of today now, and then all of them coming together to agree on one person. So you cannot imagine all the political party come together, agree on one person. Then you are likely going to see that perceived fairness, because which means all of them agree to the person that is going to lead them. Then in terms of composition, for instance, in terms of the national commissioner, you know, Nigeria have 12 national commissioner, but let's assume we have 12 political parties. How it's been done in those places you mentioned is that, look, each of the political party now have a representative. So which means APC send 1 national commissioner, PDP send 1 national commissioner, ABGA send 1 national commissioner, Labour send 1 national commissioner, 12 in number. Now, these are the people that now make decision. In times of the electoral processes, this is what will happen administratively. This is what will happen in terms of logistics. This is what will happen in terms of result management. This is what will happen in terms of voter education. So because it is perceived that each of the people going there, we have to now protect their interest. So which means you cannot just go into that particular place and later be crying that you have been reached out, because you are also represented. So that in some country that has provided that stability and credibility that they needed. Now, but in our own case, it's not like that. The last time, and I can tell you this for free, the last time we had non-partisan leadership in INEC was probably between 2011 and 2015. Now, after that, then we now begin to have dilution. So, and that was, of course, you remember, some people will even tell you that President Jonathan chose who superintended the election that took him out. And then some people also gave him that credit that, look, in fact, in some quarters, they said, as at the time President Jonathan, which some of us, it's just their opinion, but as at the time President Jonathan was choosing Jega, that he has not met Jega and he doesn't even know Jega, but it was based on competence. Then if you look at some of those national commissioners, then competent people, you know, are non-partisan. As a matter of fact, many of them that served that time have gone back to lecturing and have gone back to their law practice. So, and that is some of the that credibility we have, and then you can compare 2015 election compared to what we have in the recent days. Now, it is not only the case is not even about what, according to Serap, is not starting with President Tinubu. Don't forget that it started from during the time of President Muhammadu Buhari. There was a time President Muhammadu Buhari nominated and sent to the National Assembly a card-carrying member, Loretta Onoshe, a card-carrying member of his political party, as a matter of fact, a campaign coordinator. Now, and send the person to the National Assembly to do what? As a national commissioner for South-South. So it took a lot of protest, agitation, and the National Assembly later now discovered that, look, the president, I think May Agbamushe, is also from the same particular region, so which means they cannot have two in that particular region. And that was what saved the day. But of course, protest and everything. So that tells you the kind of endorsement that were going on. Again, now, some people have alleged that, look, the rec that superintended that supervised and conducted Edo election happens to be a political party member. And you see a whole lot of them like that. So when you now begin to see such a thing, and then what now happens is that it eroded the integrity of that election, the perceived integrity of that election, and say, look, people are going to say, no, look, they are likely going to be biased because it's a member of this political party, is going to favor his political party. And we should not also look at this appointment in isolation because APC is there. It also reflects the system of the electoral process system we practice in Nigeria, which talks about winners take it all. So, which means the moment you come into power, you control almost everything in terms of appointment, in terms of constitution of the executive committee. So you control everything. So what it means is that there is a need for us to review this process, which is very key.
All right, Ms. Idowu, talking about reviewing the process, during the introduction, I talked about some ambiguities in the Electoral Act 2022. For instance, Section 60 and Section 64 talks about transmission of results, but it didn't quite say clearly the difference between electronically transmitted results and transmitted directly. So it doesn't really quite, make any clear distinction between that. And again, Ms. Idowu, let's look at the technologies, employed by INEC. When Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, gave a speech at Chatham House before the 2023 elections, he talked about, the technologies, how they will work perfectly. Our results will be transmitted directly from polling units to IREV. Now, the technologies such as the smart card readers, IREV, which is the INEC result viewing portal, BVAS, which is the bimodal voter accreditation system, and of course, there's one other device, I'll try to recall that. Now, these are technologies introduced by INEC, but we are having challenges because here's the point, Ms. Idowu, these technologies were introduced by INEC's guidelines and regulations. But the Supreme Court, the courts in Nigeria are saying that we cannot hold INEC to the functionality of those technologies because those were not part of the Electoral Act, even though they were present in INEC's guidelines and regulation. Where do you think the disconnect is coming from? Should we actually have those, laws as part of our constitution? Because now the courts are saying that, fine, INEC came out to promise that results will be transmitted directly from polling centers to the central database, which can be viewed on the IREV. But the courts are saying that you can't really hold them to it because it's not part of the Electoral Act. What do you think we should be doing differently as a people?
So the challenge is not with INEC. The challenge is not with our law. On this matter, the challenge is with the judiciary. And because it also is with the judiciary in terms of the way they interpreted the law. Now, what we saw played out in 2023 was not the genesis. One of the things that happened in 2023 was that the Supreme Court relied on an existing precedent in terms of judgment to deliver that judgment. So you need to cast your mind back to 2015. And that was the case of Wike. Now, Wike was taken to court and said, look, in some places, smart card reader was not used.
Are you talking about Wike versus Peterside?
Exactly. That smart card reader was not used. Now, by the time they argue in court, the Supreme Court, when they were delivering their judgment, then said, look, and that judgment reduces INEC guideline as like just I mean I'm just the one using this word. That is not the statement made by the Supreme Court, but reduces INEC guideline to a mere paper, which means it cannot supersede the Electoral Act and the Constitution, and which at the same time they are right. The guideline cannot supersede the Constitution and the Electoral Act because, of course, there is a law. I think maybe like a principle that says, look, any contradiction shall be void to the extent of that contradiction so far is contradicting the Nigerian Constitution. So what they are now saying is that, look, so far it passed the test of Electoral Act and the test of the Constitution. Now, if it doesn't pass the test of INEC guideline, that should not be a ground to invalidate the election. And that is why, when they wanted to remedy that, the moment we move into the amended Electoral Act, what happened? Even including the 2020, I think that is 2022 Electoral Act. What happened? From that INEC guideline, go and look at it. Smart card reader was lifted and put into the Electoral Act. So it's no longer solely in the INEC guideline. Now, the National Assembly now went further to do something very commendable. When they said, look, when they lifted smart card reader into the INEC guideline, I mean, into the, from INEC guideline
to
into
Electoral Act.
Electoral Act, they now said smart card reader and other technological devices that may be introduced by INEC. Now, you will not be asking me, does that technological devices cover IREF? Which the question is no. It only covers beavers, because this provision of the law was just under accreditation, not under result management. So what it means now is that what do we need to do? Is just to go back into what we did in 2022 and now move transmission of results electronically, that is in the INEC guideline, IREF, that is in the INEC guideline. We only need to move it from INEC guideline and move it into the Electoral Act to give it legislative backing. The moment we do that, we are sorted out. However, this is my concern now. If that is not done, there is no way you will go to court and say INEC did not transmit electronically. There is no way you will go to court and say, look, IREF did not work, and then you will get your judgment. It's not going to be possible. That was one of the grounds at which Peter Obi, Atiku, went to court against President Tinubu, and they lost in court. The court only rely on that. So what it means, what do we need to do? Part of the reform, and which everybody is clamoring for, is move this thing from INEC guideline that is looking inferior in court now to the Electoral Act and to the Constitution. Now move it into the Electoral Act and give it legislative backing. If they are able to do that amendment, then we are in good position. But if that amendment is not done, then the election of 2027 will be conducted the same way and the same challenge you have in 2023.
All right, Ms. Idowu, it's quite interesting the way you explain that, which means that this loophole, this ambiguity in the Electoral Act actually allows INEC to break their own rules without consequences.
So far, they don't. So far, that is what it means. So far, they are not breaking the Electoral Act. So far, they are not breaking the Constitution. So what that judgment is saying is that you can break your rule that you set for yourself. Because that was the grant. Peter Obi and Atiku, one of the grants, they went to court to say, look, INEC set up a rule. And even Professor Mahmoud Yakub at Chatham House, at several fora, I was with in a meeting in the US when he also made that the same presentation that, look, this is going to be transmitted to IREF directly and everything is going to work. Then Festus Okoye, who was the spokesperson of INEC on several fora, also made the same assertion that, look, this is going to work. Now, on the day of election, when it did not work due to technical glitch, did anybody win in the court based on that? No. Did court chastise INEC that you promised IREF, you promised transmission, and you did not deliver? No. Go and read the entire judgment. There is nowhere the court chastised INEC. And that is the issue. So, which means technically they can break their rules so far it's in their guideline. This is inferior. So what we are now saying is that this kind of thing should be moved into the Electoral Act that you cannot break. You know, because I mean legally you
absolutely
cannot,
yeah,
because that is respected. But at the same time, it's just the politicization of our judiciary that is causing this. Because all over the world, the laws that set, go and look at the Constitution, the laws that set up INEC empower INEC to be able to make laws, bylaws, subsidiary laws. So why are we now saying is they cannot abide by it? But even since that judgment has been given, what do we need to do? Let's begin to advocate that this issue be moved into this place, because if you don't move it, we are going to have the same thing. So if IREF will not work in 2027, nobody can go to court. Everything moves on well. And don't forget, one of the judgments said, look, if IREF did not work, but you should have agents across all polling units. So, which means you should be your agent should be able to produce the result if IREF cannot produce it. That is the implication. But think about political party that have they don't have that financial capacity to send agent to 176,000 polling units we have in Nigeria. So
that's a huge
rely on IREF.
That's a huge concern. Mr. Idowu, please stay with us. We go on a quick break, and when we return, we look deeper into these issues of electoral reforms which are unresolved as it is. Stay with us.